Good evening, everyone. My name is Marie Dorigny. I am the Deputy Director of the Common Center for Scholars and Writers here at the New York Public Library. Our series, Conversations from the Common Center, invites former Common Center Fellows back to the library to discuss the work they accomplished during their fellowship. The last event in our full season will be on Wednesday, December 1st. Ian Fraser will talk about his latest book, Travels in Siberia, which he completed while he was a fellow here last year. And he will be interviewed by NPR's host, Robert Krulwich. We have a very exciting lineup for the spring, so please make sure you join our mailing list by signing up on your way out. You'll find all the information you need on our website, and then we have these cards out there that have our internet address as well, so make sure you take one of these. We are delighted to see so many of you tonight to hear playwrights Edward Albee and Will Eno. One of America's greatest playwrights, Edward Albee is the author of over 30 plays, including Zoo Story, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Three Tall Women, The Goat, and most recently, Me, Myself, and I, which just ended its run at Playwrights Horizon. His long list of awards include 3 Pulitzer Prizes and a National Medal of Arts. Edward Albee is also the founder of the Edward Albee Foundation in Montauk, and it is a great honor to have him here tonight. Will Eno is the author of several perceptive, sad, and funny plays, including The Flu Season, Tom Paine Based on Nothing, a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and Tragedy, a Tragedy. It's actually the title of the play. All of them admired by audiences and critics for Will's brilliant language, his sensitivity, his humor, and his sheer talent. Will has received many honors, including fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Edward Albee Foundation, and the Common Center, where he was a fellow in 2006. A couple of months ago, his most recent play, Middletown, received the inaugural Horton Foote Award for Promising New American Play, but it's much more than just promising. Middletown, with its outstanding cast, and I see one of you tonight in the audience, is playing through December 5th at the Vineyard Theater. The New York Times calls it pitch perfect. It glimmers from start to finish, and I urge all of you to race down there and see it as soon as you can. This conversation will be moderated by another exceptional writer, Jean Strouse. Jean is the author of 2 remarkable biographies, Alice James and J.P. Morgan. She is also the director of the Common Center. The talk will go on for about 45 minutes. We'll have time for a couple of questions. And then both Will Eno and Edward Albee will be signing books outside. So if you would please leave the auditorium after the talk, everybody will be out there.
Thank you, Marie. I definitely echo Marie urging you all to go see Middletown. And there is, or was, a production of Edward Albee's A Delicate Balance at the Yale Rep in New Haven. We're not sure whether it closed last weekend or this coming weekend, but if it's this coming weekend, check it out and get to New Haven. It's supposed to be wonderful. It's starring Kathleen Chalfant and Edward Herman, but it may be finished. We'll see. Edward, when people ask how long it takes you to write a play you have written, you tell them all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So
that way I don't have to explain anything.
Right. So tonight, I hope you both will be talking about what you've both been doing all of your lives, which shouldn't be hard, and you don't have to explain anything. You've known each other for quite some time. How did you meet?
We were just trying to make
remember
sure.
This, yes. I can't remember anything, so you figure it out.
Okay.
I think it was in Montauk at the Edward Albee Foundation where I had applied writing some fiction, some short monologues, and also just to be...
Well, you couldn't have gotten in there if I hadn't approved of you.
Right. Well,
so I haven't met you, but I've met your work.
All right. Also, to be 100% clear, just in case anyone thinks they might be in the wrong room, this is not Jay-Z, the R&B impresario, and nor is this Cornell West. That's at the other end of the library.
Well, who does that make you not?
That makes me not Helen Mirren.
Paul Holdenglaber.
I'm not Helen Mirren. No.
Okay.
No. But so we met there, and I love telling this story, even though there's nothing enjoyable about it for anyone really in the story. But I was at the Edward Albee Foundation, and I bought a package of hot dogs at some point because you know, there's a nice kitchen and you make your food. And so I was eating a hot dog one day, and Edward delightfully comes around to drop the mail off every day when you're there. And so I was having my hot dog, he dropped the mail off. And then that night he won a Tony. I think it must have been for the revival of A Delicate Balance, I think. So he wins his Tony that night, and then the next day he came around and I happened to be eating a hot dog. No, I wasn't eating a hot dog. And Edward said, "You're not eating a hot dog." And that's just to give you a sense of the wit of the man, you know? And the keen observations. The keen observations.
Your writing has gotten better.
Didn't he or someone say that you were James Agee with a sense of humor?
He did. He may not remember it or may deny it now, but I had some things read in that crazy little storefront theater that you had never stepped into in your 25 years at Montauk, and that was what this person said.
It's a pretty good quote, don't you think?
So I wasn't terribly surprised when it led to some really good stuff like the flu season and all that.
Tragedy, a tragedy. The New York Times has also called you Samuel Beckett for the Jon Stewart generation. There are some very good quotes about Will. And actually, both of you have been compared to Samuel Beckett. I wonder what you make of that lineage, if you agree with it.
Well, the only problem with being compared to Sam Beckett is that you're bound to be compared unfavorably.
But you're alive.
Yeah, I know, but it's not going to get that much better. No, he's such a great writer, so the most important playwright of the second half of the 20th century, I'm certain. And, of course you're influenced by somebody that good. You'd be a damn fool if you weren't. But compared to, no, I don't think we're compared to. I think we're mentioned in the same sentence occasionally.
But there are modern playwrights who didn't necessarily take that line. The two of you have. I mean...
What line?
I mean, the descendant from, or the comparison to...
Well, we're descendants of a lot of people.
Yes, okay.
I was asked once, and this gets quoted all the time, so I can't deny it, even though I'd like to. Somebody asked me a long time ago who had influenced me, what playwrights had influenced me. I was feeling sort of smug that day. And I said, Sophocles and Noel Coward. Except that it's true. Because you're influenced by every single, if you're a playwright, by not only every play you've read, but every string quartet you've listened to, every painting you've seen. You're influenced by all of the arts and everything in all of the arts. But who influences you? You're influenced favorably and you're influenced unfavorably. And the most amazing people do the most amazing things that you don't expect they're going to do. I mean, I think that Sophocles, when you come right down to it, is probably as good a playwright as Noel Coward, at least. Yeah. But they both did the thing that they did beautifully and very, very well. And there's stuff to be learned from both of them. And so your influence is merely a matter of what you accept and what you reject, right? So I was perfectly happy to learn stuff from Sophocles and perfectly happy to learn stuff from Noel Coward. And from this one.
I got to say, I don't want to get all Freudian on everybody, but probably, in a funny way, my father has had the most effect on me of anyone in my life, and I swear he's probably said 17 words.
Was he the
to me.
writer who had the most influence on you?
Just the presence, and
Yeah.
you know, I think from the age of 0 to 18, the only thing I remember him saying was he came in once holding some sneakers, and he said, "Are these yours?" And then I'm sure he must have said something to me in my 20s, and then
You haven't used that line yet.
no.
You're probably going to.
Silence.
Yeah,
Use
well,
silence.
it's funny. I think there's a preoccupation with identity that maybe Edward and I share. That is not, in a funny way, not so highfalutin. It's just an uncertainty about who I is when you say I am this. And
You know where the term highfalutin comes from?
I do, but everyone wants to hear, so you should.
No, you tell him. You tell him. I told him, so you tell him.
What's that?
I told you, so you tell him.
I don't know where the term highfalutin.
It's high fluting. The fluting, the decorative fluting at the ceilings.
Huh.
That's where it comes from. Isn't that interesting?
Oh.
Mildly.
Modified rapture.
Yeah.
I have to say, actually, my dad must have said one other thing to me other than, "Are these yours?" Because I remember getting in a fight with him about etymologies once, and I've always found that the source of a word, the origin of a word, has to be more mysterious than people. I'm sure you're right, and it's highfalutin and all that, but you know, the word tree comes from
I made
somewhere.
it up, but I hope it's true.
But I've always found words far more mysterious than, oh, that comes from this because they used to call this that.
I mean, take a word like sophisticated. Sophistry used to be a bad thing, and now it's meant to be something wonderful.
There's still a little bit of a stink to it.
To sophisticated or sophistry?
Sophisticated seems. Maybe that's because I'm sort of a kid who did
Unsophisticated.
landscaping as a youth. But Emerson had a great thing about two great things. All words were once animals, I think. Did he say?
Don't know.
Which is probably kind of true when you think that's what you'd. If some giant thing is sneaking up behind you, you would want to know. That would be what you'd come up with a word for first. It's one of those things behind you.
Run.
Yeah. But then I also like the sort of more poetic connotations of words being animals is also I enjoy, as does that person who's maybe laughing about something else. But I'm not sure.
Are you sure he said that?
All words were once animals? I'm almost positive.
I must find out why.
But I used to I just proofread psychology textbooks. And I remember there's an important experiment they did to try to come up with a correlation between certainty and correctitude. You know, and they would ask people who won the Super Bowl in 1997, how sure of this fact are you? And they found almost no correlation. You know, the people who said 90% sure and the people who said 30% sure ended up being roughly as right or wrong, which is helpful to me because I've always resisted, or I've not been a great one about being certain about things. So I'm always glad to have psychological textbooks on my side.
I like correctitude. Did you just make that up now?
I guess so. If it's not a
think you
word,
did.
then
Maybe. Or it was.
no.
Why, Edward, do 2-hour plays have intermissions while 2-hour movies do not?
Pardon me? Say that again.
Why do 2-hour plays have intermissions and 2-hour movies do not?
Because when people go to the movies, it is an unreal experience and they don't have to go to the bathroom.
There you go.
That was the
And if
shortest.
they do, it doesn't matter because the movie doesn't matter.
That was the shortest, pithiest version of that I've ever heard. But I think I remember Edward saying that once before, and I found that startling and startlingly true that it seems
Surprising.
it seems unheard of that you would have a 2-hour play without having some break in the middle, but there are a lot of 2-hour movies. And
I did once.
uh,
We did my adaptation of Carson McCullers' The Ballad of the Sad Cafe, straight through without an intermission. And some people weren't amused by that.
I heard a lot of people left after it was over.
Fast.
Yeah. But the point
They had to go
about-
to the bathroom.
Yeah, but I found that an incredibly exciting notion that your body is in a much more alive state in terms of its natural processes in a play than in a movie.
Yeah, because plays are happening while you're there, and movies have happened.
Right.
Movies always take place in the past.
Okay. Edward, you've said that for the playwright, this is a quote, opening nights do not really exist. They happen, but they take place as if in a dream. One tries to follow the play, but one can make no sense of it. And if one is called to the stage afterwards to take a bow, one wonders why, for one can make no connection between the work just presented and oneself.
Well, I based this remark on the world premiere of my first play, The Zoo Story,
In Berlin.
which took place in West Berlin in German. So, of course, it didn't happen.
Have you felt that way?
No, I don't go to opening nights anymore because there's nothing you can do. Do you go to opening nights?
I went this last time.
Is that your first time at them?
No, but I feel that same way. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like it's
You can't
German.
do anything.
No.
If the set falls down, you can't put it back up. If the actors forget their lines, you're screwed. And it's hopeless. You can't do anything. Rehearsals are okay. You can do stuff and fix stuff, but opening night, nothing.
But if I may, is it purely that night, or do you feel that sense of the thing being a strange animal that you don't have anything to do with at other points?
After a certain point of rehearsal, not that I have made many changes in the course of the rehearsal anyway in my plays, there is a certain point where you have to leave everything where it is, and there's nothing to be done. You just have to leave them alone and hope that they remember their lines and that they hope that they do a good job, because you can't get up there and stop them or do anything about it. And there's no point in going.
So you have the same experience. You said it feels like it's German in German.
Yeah. Yeah, but not, and it has less to do, I must have that same feeling of giving up control and all that, but then there's also another part where it sort of feels alien to me anyway.
Well, there's nothing more bizarre or alien than writing plays anyway.
Yeah.
Pretty odd way to spend your life.
You, Edward, went to the opening of Middletown a week and a half ago or so.
Yeah, well, that's not my play.
I know. I know. So how was it?
How was it? I thought it was pretty damn good.
And I gather you spoke with the cast afterwards?
I think
Is that right?
Yeah, sure, we both did. Yeah.
Wasn't your cast. And there's a cast member right up front here. We don't want to embarrass her, but
We sort of do. One
We
of
do.
one of my favorite people and an incredible actor, Georgia Engel, is sitting right here, staring at her. And I believe she's single.
Still or again?
doesn't matter. A question about form, and I want you all, I mean, I don't need to be asking questions all the time. If you guys want to just take off and run on your own, that's fine. Do you think about formal rules in writing plays like the rules of musical composition, for instance, as you're working?
They're the same.
They're the same. That's what I want you to talk about.
Every string quartet has its duration. It should be as long as it needs to be, and not a note longer and not a note shorter. And this is true about every play. It should be as long as it needs to be, and not a word longer or a word shorter. It has nothing to do with how long a play should be or how long a string quartet should be. Plays, they tell you, should be no more than 2 hours because that's the attention span of the audience. And they also got to get home and pay the babysitter. But I've seen plays that I thought were gloriously full experiences being 10 or 12 minutes long, several plays by Sam Beckett. They were such complete experiences for me that I left the theater and didn't want to see anything else afterwards. They were doing 3 or 4 of his plays together. And I've sat at the Japanese Bunraku Theater in Japan, the great puppet theater, 6-7 hours at a time, and that didn't seem too long. Nor did the Beckett play seem too short. This whole notion, it gets into the difference between a one-act and a full-length play. Now, a full-length play is meant to be twice as long as a one-act play. But a full-length play is a play that is full to its length. And it doesn't matter how long the damn thing is. We use such weird terms to describe things.
It just occurred to me, we don't talk about half-length plays. Yeah, it's a half-length play. I'm working on a...
Right, half-length plays, yeah.
But on the music...
A lot of people write them.
But we don't talk about them.
No, yeah.
I think it's Walter Pater had that quote that all arts aspire toward the condition of music, which I take to mean that the form and content and the feeling and sense of the thing are all simultaneous or identical, which I think is you can do in music and can try to approach in writing, but it's a good thing to shoot for, I think.
Paintings have their own duration too. That's called size or shape, but that's the same thing as duration.
And books, they sort of let you know how long they need to be.
Until the editors get a hold of them.
Right. Will and I were talking about this a little bit. At the beginning, I'm not going to ask you where you get your ideas or how you get started writing, but...
Schenectady.
Right. There's a famous story about Einstein, it may or may not be true, that some reporter came up to him and said, "Professor, where do you get your ideas?" And Einstein said, "Oh, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, do you get your ideas when you're taking a walk or playing your violin or in the shower?" And Einstein thought for a minute and he said, "Actually, I've only had 1 or 2. Which is nice.
It is nice. He also, everyone must know it, but I think it's such a delightful thing of Einstein going to speak to some 4th graders or something like that, and they told him, we're having problems with math, and he said, "Yeah, I have problems with math. I assure you my problems are greater, but I have problems with math too." Will and I were talking about looking for like almost a tempo or a key or a riff at the beginning, not so much an idea or a plot, but an element that's kind of picks you up and gets you going. Do you want to say anything about that? That my happiest moments as a writer have been where I sort of have, if you can somehow come up with a formal structure that you can then just let yourself go in, I've found my greatest, freest, happiest moments just knowing, okay, it's going to be this, and it's going to be sort of like that, and it's going to have that kind of a rhythm to it, and
that's the moment that you realize the formal structure that you have already decided before you were consciously aware of it.
Right, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Again, it lets you know.
Yeah, it informs you, certainly.
Right, and then I think in a funny way, it's just a matter of, I kind of think if there's one rule if there's 1 out of 4 rules for art, it's particularly art that takes place in time, it's repetition and then change and repetition and then change. And so once you get the riff going, it's just sort of a matter of realizing when you need to make a change and sort of change.
One of the worst things a playwright can be asked, the very worst question that a playwright can be asked, And the only response to that is to hit the person who asked the question. What are you trying to say, Mr. Albee, in this play? That is an insult. There are only two answers to this other awful question. What is your play about, Mr. Eno? There are only two answers that make any sense. A, it's about 2 hours. That's the short form. The longer answer is, it is about every single thing that has happened to all of the characters in the play from the moment they were born until they die way after the play is open. That is what it is about.
And I do think the response of every individual consciousness who's watching that play on that night is what it's about. And the building of the Panama Canal.
And there's also this preposterous idea that people have, that we playwrights have ideas which lead to plays. Don't you find out what your play is about by writing it?
Actually, I wanted to ask you this.
Yeah, I do.
When you got married to Beyonce, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. No,
and that wasn't my first marriage either.
Now, if there's a moment of grace that I feel in the whole process, it's prior to beginning. I get this strange feeling that sort of has that's sort of staged in a way.
It's called being with play.
Right. Yeah. I think. But in a very specific way, and I sort of know. Okay, that it's sort of that many people in that kind of light, something like that. But do you have something like that?
No, I got these people who start turning up.
Huh.
And they want to talk. And they obviously want to be in a play. So eventually I let them. And then I listen to them and find out why they're there. Yeah. We all write the same way.
I don't think any of my characters want to be in plays, actually. They just sort of sheepishly show up and say, don't put me in this. Do not put me in this.
You make them be in your plays, don't you? Yeah.
Please don't put me in that play.
Right.
Do you rewrite much? Both of you? Either you go first. Do you rewrite a lot?
More than I admit to, but less than most people do. Because I wait a long time to get to know my characters fairly well so that I can give myself the illusion that they're writing the play. And then I can turn it over to them and I don't have to worry about it. But no, I don't rewrite much compared to the way a lot of other people do. And certainly far less than, unfortunately, playwrights are being encouraged to rewrite these days by producers and people who run theaters totally for incorrect commercial reasons. We want to make your play safer. We want to make it more commercial. You must rewrite. It is too long. Is it? For what? For the audience attention. Oh, get a different audience.
The British have a sort of sneering but sort of delightful joke about the American theater system, about all the workshopping that goes on with plays. And they say if Shakespeare were alive today and living in America, they would still be trying to get him to get the end of Measure for Measure right.
Well, that would be a good idea.
Workshopping. The British also say that the Americans mainly applaud the sets. Sorry, you were going to ask something else.
Oh, no. And I'm glad that you're at least copping to rewriting a little bit, because I've heard Edward speak to students in the, you've said stuff like drafts are for pussies or something awful like that. So that's good, because I do a lot of rewriting and take a long time. And
why would you begin putting anything on paper unless you thought you knew what you were doing?
But you just said, don't you find out what you're doing as you're putting it?
Yeah, of course you do.
So,
But if you're lucky, you have waited until it is coherent when you put it down.
I've always felt this way about Edward, that he was born in a tuxedo and he just sort of came out and said, "Hey, you won't believe what just happened to me." But I have a slower slower on the uptake.
This guy's good. He hasn't turned on me yet either,
I think it's past that.
that I know of.
I want to come back to what you said a minute ago about Edward was saying the play is about every single thing that happens to the characters before and after, and you said, and to everyone watching it. Edward, you've said that what makes modern contemporary theater interesting is that the catharsis is no longer in the body of the play, it takes place in the audience.
That's probably an oversimplification.
Hey.
But plays used to have to be constructed, commercial plays anyway, Ibsen's day and all that stuff. But all the problems were solved, and the audience would go home and not have to worry about anything. They'd had a full experience. But the wonderful thing about 20th century plays, or a lot of them anyway, and 21st century plays, is the audience takes what the play is still about out of the theater with it and worries it and learns from it and thinks about it. And that's so exciting. It's not all tied together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, catharsis is not meant to be a mind-deadening experience.
I think that's such an amazing. You just said that the other day, the catharsis thing, and I think that's such an exciting notion. And in my brashest moments, or my happiest, maybe most arrogant moments, I've sort of had this notion that whatever play I wrote, it was about that person in the audience and every following day of that person's life on Earth after they left seeing my play, which is supremely, supremely arrogant view.
What arrogance, huh?
But you got to come up with something when you don't really know what your play's about, and you have to say,
It's about you out there.
Well, any play that you can tell what it's about in 2 sentences should be 2 sentences long.
Or 3, just so you have a nice little coda at the end there.
After the tremendous success of Zoo Story, which was Edward's first play, it's a play in one scene that takes place on a park bench. John Guare said that theater for years after was littered with park benches. Will you do the minimal sets in your plays owe a debt to that park bench, do you think?
Say that.
Do the minimal sets in your plays owe a debt to that park bench?
Oh, I'm sure. And between Edward and Samuel Beckett and someone else.
He who shall not be named.
Right. But for whatever reason, and I almost think it's a result of my not having studied theater in the formative years and the years where you actually retain things, so that I just always had a sense that it was human beings with mouths.
What did you start writing? How did you begin writing? How did you begin your writing? What did you write first?
I have a photograph of this a page in a notebook, and you can see I used a pencil, and I was really mad about something, and it was sort of stabbing the words into the thing, and it just says, "I can't do anything." And I think that was sort of my first attempt that was my earliest writing.
And having a sense of history, you saved it?
I just remember I took a picture of it for some reason there. For my, what did you call them, holdings?
Holdings, yes.
I'm donating my leavings to the
Well, what was it?
New York Public Library Performing Arts Center.
Better.
Was it an angry poem? Was it a short story? What was it?
I have no idea. I just remember finding it and then thinking, huh. But so anyway.
How old were you?
I must have
28?
been. I was something. I was in the 20s somewhere.
I can't do anything.
I can't do anything. Yeah. Big all caps. Torn piece of paper. Wow.
What's your favorite play by someone not on this stage?
Say that again?
What is your favorite play by someone not on this stage?
Oh. Well,
I can never think of anyone.
You want a list of 75 playwrights and 275
Maybe
plays?
Five.
Come on, there's an awful lot of stuff around.
Yeah, there is.
Well, we all know my enormous admiration for Beckett's work. I think that a playwright that you can mention to a lot of theater students, and they will say, "Where is that?" And that's Pirandello. Where is that? They will say.
Someplace in Italy.
And there's someone. I mean, between Chekhov and Pirandello, and Beckett and some of Brecht, you've got the whole thing covered. You know, pretty much. No.
Yeah.
In the 20th century, 19th and 20th century.
Yeah. Well, Thornton Wilder and.
That's an amazing thing about Thornton. Whenever they make the list of the great American playwrights, O'Neill and Miller and Williams, they always leave Thornton Wilder off. And I'm convinced, having finally seen this wonderful, wonderful production that just closed off-Broadway, I saw it 3 times, that may be one of the very, very greatest American plays. And Thornton Wilder is an extraordinarily important playwright. And golly, I don't know why nobody includes him.
There was a production of Our Town that was down at the Barrow Street Theater. Probably
it was an
many people here
amazing
saw it.
production.
It was fantastic.
No longer was that play to be considered the sort of prose version of the Christmas Carol. It was a tough, experimental, existentialist, really hard and beautiful and sad play. And everybody got a chance to figure that out finally. That was so nice that happened.
Mm-hmm. It was really great. Mm-hmm. We talked about how much it made us cry.
Yeah, I have sort of friends from a small town in Massachusetts visiting, and they were so cute. And I come from a small town in Massachusetts, but they were worried they were going to embarrass me because they knew they were going to cry a lot as the thing was deepening and moving toward its conclusions. But yeah, your crying line is, "Where's my girl? Where's my birthday girl?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's my girl? When she comes back after being dead and the father comes downstairs, "Where's my girl? Where's my birthday girl?" I cry a few times before then. You know, on a good night, I can cry 5 minutes into the play.
If I'm hydrated, no, I remember in seeing that production, there's opening moments where there's just this nonchalant setting of the scene, and so David Cromer, who's playing the stage manager, is just sort of going through the different people, and he's saying, "Oh, there's Mrs. Webb. She died in 1941." And it was just, like you say, it was so hard, and it admitted no sentimentality, but was filled with feeling, and it was hard to avoid, I think.
I had a wonderful moment there. David Cromer spent some time talking to individual members of the audience, and one night he didn't know I was there, and he happened to turn to me, and he said 5 or 6 sentences of the play directly to me, and that was so exciting. That was so beautiful and wonderful.
I was in Australia in the spring, and I met a woman who you know. I can't think of her name right now, but she was telling the story.
Who, Anne Lewis?
No, a playwright, a youngish woman. But so in Our Town, there is this character of the stage manager, and they had asked you to play the stage manager.
Yeah, I would have loved to have done it, except the 2 times they asked. I used to act, you know, when I went to prep school and all that sort of thing. I was acting my head off. Do you know that my first appearance on stage, what I call professionally when I was at school, my voice hadn't changed yet. My first appearance on stage as an actor was as a middle-aged British matron. Just thought I'd share that.
But this woman told the story about, she said, yeah, Edward told me they asked him to be the stage manager for a production of some play up in New York.
No, Cromer asked me if I could take over the role for him, but I couldn't. I was busy.
But she didn't really know the play, so she thought it just meant, running around getting coffee for the cast. He seemed so excited. He seemed really honored by the request.
That would have been great.
I don't know whether I could have done it. I probably would have started crying once or twice.
Well, when was the last time you cried? Each of you.
The last time I cried, probably at our town.
That was a while ago.
No, about a year. I don't cry every day. I cry over things that should be cried over.
I'm trying to think if I've cried in fiscal 2010. I'm not sure.
No,
we were talking about this the other day.
We're whimpering over that.
What?
We're whimpering over that.
Right, whimpering. Yeah.
I'm swiping a question. Will interviewed Edward not too long ago and asked him the last time he cried, so I thought I'd ask it again.
It's probably not recently enough, I guess would be my answer, but it wasn't, I don't know. I think we all have peaks and troughs. And
there's all kinds of crying.
Yes.
There's the one you can do deep inside without any sound or anything coming out of you.
That one, right? That one that he's doing right now. Yeah. And then there's the other more outward kind.
Yeah.
Right.
When was the last time you cried?
That's a good question.
It's your question.
It's my question, right? Fiscal 2010.
It's not so nice.
No,
is it now?
it's hard. Yeah, sorry, you're right. Yeah. Private, I guess. But, yeah.
I have to say, that movie Babe, I don't know why, this has been true for all of my life. When some animal or person who's not supposed to succeed then succeeds and then everybody applauds, that's where I always cry. And I really do at curtain calls, sometimes more than plays. The curtain call, I always find that such an incredible moment where, and I remember seeing some production of Shakespeare in the park, and so there was a great curtain call where all the actors came running over this green hill, and so you saw this crazy old man in a robe with his hair who had been dead for 2 acts or something like that, but all running down the hill holding hands, and I love that for some reason.
One of the last times I cried at a Shakespeare play was when the director directing Hamlet had the common sense to end the play with the line, "Good night, sweet prince, a band of angels sing me to thy rest," and he ended the play there where it should end. I cried out of relief.
Well, maybe we should take some questions from the audience. There are microphones on either side, and it will be much easier for us to answer your questions if you actually go to the microphone so we can hear you. So who wants to step up and step to the side?
Thanks for your water.
Yeah, finish up.
Hi.
Hi, speak up.
I was wondering, for both of you actually, before your plays were very successful and actually after they were successful, how did you keep working and keep writing and creating?
I write because I'm a playwright. I write because I'm a writer. I get things that start turning into plays since I write plays. I started as a very bad poet and then went on to being an even worse novelist and almost as bad a short story writer. And that was all terrible, and I knew I was a writer, so I started writing plays, and that's worked out a little bit better. I write because I'm a writer. Plays happen in my head. I'm aware of the fact that they're there. And so I can, walk and chew gum at the same time. I got to get them out of my head. And they just happen. I've got 4 of them right now that are waiting to be written down. I know they're there.
Characters are talking to you? The characters are talking to you?
Yeah, I know what's going on in all of them. I'm a little worried about it. I'm going to get them mixed up, maybe. I don't think so.
I have to say, in some weird way, and I don't know where I got this from, but it's always seemed to me if you're giving your life to trying to make art and giving up your body on earth to try to make art, that somehow the only sufficient response when you achieved this thing, or you finished this thing, and you think, hey, maybe I did that. The only sufficient thing would be that some weird gods come down and they touch you on the shoulder and you turn into an eagle and fly away and then burst into flames, kind of. And so that everything else is sort of insufficient, whether someone says, hey, this stinks, or hey, that's a really great play.
Tony Kushner did it. Doesn't quite work.
You know. But so I mean to say, there's a way that maybe you, do you write plays? I think it's good to be bent on some insane project that doesn't really have to do with this world.
People are things. You know, some people are axe murderers. That's their nature. Some people are even Republicans.
Okay, here's my question.
Not many, but some. And some of us are writers. And some of us are composers, and some of us are painters, and some of us do architecture, because that is our nature. And it's nice to live in a country where you can still practice your nature for the most part.
I remember my first axe murder. It took 10 minutes to realize this is not what I'm all about.
I told you were really bad at it.
I can't do anything, but I could do that.
Okay,
Not well,
here's
though.
my question. Thank you. This is for Edward Albee about the Ballad of the Sad Cafe and the concerns of bringing it from the page to the stage.
What was the question? I'm sorry, I'm a little deaf. I didn't hear it.
Okay, the Ballad of the Sad Cafe.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard all that.
Okay.
I didn't hear the question.
Bringing it from the page to the stage, what were the concerns that you were involved in, and how did that work?
Well, now you take read Carson McCullers' novella, The Ballad of the Sad Cafe. It's a wonderful, wonderful novella about this giant of a woman and this crippled dwarf who sort of hangs around with her and happens to fall in love with her young husband and does terrible things and destroys the marriage. The interesting thing about it for me as a playwright, I thought, wow, what an enormously visual story this is. This will be wonderful on stage. The problem was there's not a word of dialogue in Carson McCullers' The Ballad of the Sad Cafe. Now, here was I going to make it into a play, which means I had to, there'd be nothing but dialogue, as you know, in a play, stage directions and dialogue. I had to invent what Carson McCullers would have written had she written the play and had she been me. It's as close as I can come to it. And one critic, when the play opened, got a lot of good reviews. One critic, in his infinite wisdom, said, well, Albee didn't have to do very much when he did this adaptation. All he had to do was take all the dialogue from the book and put it on stage. I was very proud of myself that he thought, in his ignorance, that Carson had written all those lines, when indeed I had. So I succeeded in my intention of writing the play that Carson would have written had she not written it as a novel.
I wonder if each of you might speak to the use of the ellipsis in your writing. I'm an actor, and I've had the pleasure of working on Mr. Albee's work, and I know that sometimes in the room, we actors can get around in our desire to find the life of the play and also honor the intention of the playwright. We will go over and over what ... might mean in the middle of a speech or something, and as opposed to pause, beat, such. So I wonder if you might speak to what you mean by that, and if not, maybe in your experience, what has been maybe the wrong turn in interpreting the ellipsis?
You want to do it first, or shall I?
I'll be quick because
Okay.
I've for a couple of years I've been thinking that it'd be great if there was one more punctuation mark that was sort of a double M dash and a ... because I sometimes put ... And I don't know if this is your experience, but that seems to be rendered very thoughtfully, kind of, and you sort of almost feel an actor going, dot, dot, dot.
Absolutely.
When
We do that, and we know it's wrong.
But when really, you go ahead, but that's, I don't know.
If you're a playwright, you have to punctuate very much the way a composer notates. There's a quarter note, which has a certain durational value. It's a sound, a quarter note. Depending upon the tempo, it has the duration of a quarter note. Right next to it, there can be a dotted quarter note. Now, a dotted quarter note is the same duration as the quarter note plus half. It is the same duration as the quarter note plus an eighth note. That's a dotted quarter note. I wanted to be a composer when I was a kid. I discovered Bach, and I figured that anybody who could do that, I wanted to spend a lot of time with. But I was totally incompetent. But I did learn a great deal about the relationship between punctuation and musical notation. And playwrights especially notate, we punctuate the way we hear. There's a wonderful moment in one of Beckett's plays where there's a sentence, then a stage direction, 2-second silence, another sentence, all this is by Beckett, another stage direction, 3-second silence, then another sentence. I was directing that play. I think it was Happy Days. Or it may have been Kraft's Last Tape. I can't remember. And I said to my actor, I said, I want to try something. I want you to reverse those two silences. I want you to reverse the 3-second silence and the 2-second silence. I want to see what happens. Because I knew what was going to happen. I knew it wouldn't work. And then he did it 3-second silence first, then the 2-second silence, and it was wrong, totally wrong. And then he went back and he did it the way Beckett heard it. I don't know of many playwrights who hear as clearly and precisely as Beckett does. He knows the durations. He writes plays the way a composer hears. And the more a playwright can be very precise in punctuation, knowing the durational difference between a comma and a semicolon, for example, and how it is the duration of sound. And the more as a playwright that you start thinking like a composer, because you're putting down what you hear. You don't put down a line because you see it. You put down a line because you hear it. Your character is speaking the line. You hear the durations. You hear the sound. You hear the silence. And so everything we use in our plays, the 3 dots, and everything else. Did I call it ellipsis? I never knew what it was called.
I think so.
No, thank you. The more we can punctuate the way a composer notates, the more help we can be to actors who will learn to hear the way we punctuate. So it's trying to be precise, and composers help us an awful lot there. Don't you find that true?
I find that true. And then do you use the word beat? I can't think. I don't think you do.
No.
Yeah. And there's no reason I don't, except I just always have found it an ugly word to put as a.
How long is a beat?
Right. But so I think there are idiosyncrasies to each. I think what you just hope to do is be consistent throughout your own thing of here's the mark of what a pause is, and then you could establish a brief pause and a long pause.
You know, a composer has fast, slow, loud, soft, angry, Pacific. All of these are usually in Italian in the score, and they indicate the way the damn thing's meant to be played. And playwrights do the same thing. Indicate to help the actor or the reader be able to hear exactly the way the playwright wants the line to be heard. And that's terribly important.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Albee, could you talk a little bit about the enormous and really powerful rage that propels most of your plays, and where it comes from? Have you lost it? Are you proud of the rage? Am I talking through the other side of my face? I've always got in trouble because of that, and you've made great art out of it.
I write my plays to find out why I'm writing them and find out what's been going on in my head. It's that simple. I do not ever decide it is now time to write a play about this or that problem or this or that subject. I begin with characters who inform me why they're there. I always start with character. And I find out why they're there. And if they're there for a valid reason, it turns into a play. If it turns out to be dramatically effective, well, that's because I guess I'd rather write dramatically effective plays than dramatically ineffective ones. I don't know. But I don't think in those terms a lot. I write them to find out why I'm doing it. And that's a lot of fun. I've never found writing to be a torture, as so many non-writers keep telling us. Novelists who write about writers keep telling us how terribly painful it all is. It's not. It's wonderful fun, isn't it?
I don't really like it, but...
And then don't stop doing it, though. You don't like it, huh?
No, but then same thing, you know, I keep sitting down to keep
I'm
trying.
doing
So,
it, yeah.
But I think I find it slightly less delightful than you
Is there anything else you'd rather do?
Axe murder.
Well, no, I just, no time, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Good night. So you both spoke about how strange and animal your play becomes once it's played for the first time, and I'm wondering how this develops over time, because you could hear a novelist, for instance, saying, "Oh, this was one of my youth novels," and he doesn't have to reopen it. But in your case, maybe every 5, 6, 7 years, someone will come and say, "I want to put up your play," and it's something you wrote a long time ago. And I'm wondering, is it how it appears to you then? Are you diving back into a certain time of your life, or are you discovering it as a new play? Or I'm just wondering how this becomes over time. Does it make sense?
If there's a revival of a play you wrote
I hate that term.
Sorry. A new production
Thank you.
of a play that you wrote a long time ago, is it like a bit like reaching back into your closet for some garment you haven't worn in a long time? Does it feel youth, like something you did in your youth that isn't still meaningful to you, or do you find a way for it to become a new event? Is that sort of what you're asking, Pauline? How do you feel about those, the new productions of old works, I suppose?
I don't think of it as old work. I think of it as something
Early
that,
work.
if anybody wants to still do it, it must have some pertinence. Nobody wants to do anything as a historical document. Somebody wants to do it because it seems to make dramatic sense now. And if it doesn't, they're not going to do it. So I make the assumption that if anybody wants to do a play of mine that I wrote, 45 whether the result is valid or not is another matter. I'm delighted that people still want to do some of the very early plays that I wrote. I'm delighted by it. We all have plays. Plays you're fond of and nobody will go near. And they're some of your best, they will be some of your best ones, by the way. So it's very, very hard to judge about all of that. If anybody wants to do something and they're going to do a good job of it, sure, why not? Let it happen. But I don't think about it as, I don't go around revising things, because I'm not the same person. I don't let anybody else rewrite my plays. Why would I let me? You know?
I just have to say real quick, there is this alien qualities that sometimes a play takes on, and I actually don't think it's a function of time. It's a function of stranger or less predictable things than time. But I have to say, so there was that I'm blanking on a very common noun, conference, that, out in Omaha.
Omaha, ha, ha. Yeah.
Right, I didn't know it was pronounced that way. But there was a production that some students at a small college out there did of, was it The American Dream? I can't remember. Actually, I've not only forgot the word conference, but also they take grandma to the beach and there's the...
That's the Sandbox.
Right, which I think was 50 years old that year, possibly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Grandma was older.
but it was the strangest. I could not be more envious of that experience that I think you had, where watching that thing, and it just seemed like, it seemed absolutely as if it was something that was happening right there in that moment. But there was not a thing about it. It hadn't given up any of its privateness, actually, and any of its strangeness had not been yielded apparent or obvious in any way by 50 years of human history, which I thought was an amazing
There's one thing about that play. It's only 12 minutes long.
Well,
And it's very hard to make too many mistakes in 12 minutes. Give me 2 minutes more, I would have fucked it up.
One last question.
My question has to do with new productions of plays that have already been written. And you mentioned David Cromer's Our Town. He's also a director. He's also a genius. He won a Guggenheim, as we all know. Which of your plays, Mr. Albee, would you choose for him to direct?
I would have to think a little bit more about, I've only seen one play that David Cromer has directed, and that is Our Town. I'd have to see some more plays that he directed to find out where his strengths were and where his weaknesses were before I could make a sensible judgment about that. There are some directors who are much better directing one kind of play than another kind of play. And I write such a variety of different stylistic and thematic plays that I would have to find something that the director and I were congenial and found that we got together. I mean, I think he's an enormously gifted director, but I haven't seen enough of his work to make a valid judgment as to which of my plays, if he wanted to direct any of them, would be best for him to do. I don't know.
Well, thank you both a great deal for this extremely entertaining evening. As Marie said, both writers will sign books at the back, and so please let them escape back there and ask your questions after you've bought their books, their plays, and ask them to sign.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
was wonderful.